Well, good morning, Georgianna. Welcome to this week's Take 5. And I want to start off this week with a bit of a confession, if that's okay. So, in this new era of Disney and Disney Plus and streaming services and all that, here's my confession. I have become a Star Wars fan. And that's like super embarrassing to say out loud, but there it is. And one of the newer stories that Disney is writing and producing is called The Mandalorian. And I'm going to spare you a whole bunch of details because you already think I'm just a massive nerd anyway. But the nutshell of the story is this. Mandalorians in the Star Wars universe, they're this race of people who live by this very, very strict creed that dictates how they go through their lives in honorable and noble sort of ways. And so whenever they encounter something that doesn't really make sense to them or doesn't seem like that's how the world is supposed to work, they get this very unsatisfying response from whoever's in charge. And it's based on the creed. And if you've seen the show, you already know what I'm about to say. The response is, this is the way. This is the way. That's the response that they get when there's something that they don't really understand about the world or about what they're being asked to do. Well, this is the way. We've been in this devotional series over the past few weeks that goes over the Beatitudes. And the Beatitudes are almost like Proverbs, where they're these like short, pithy little statements. And the Beatitudes in particular are statements about how to live happy and blessed lives. But you get into them and you encounter statements like this. It'll say, blessed are the poor, or blessed are those who mourn, or blessed are those who are persecuted. And you wonder if you're in the right place. Like, is this how you live happy and blessed lives? Blessed are those who are persecuted. It doesn't really quite make sense. So when I get confused or frustrated by reading the Beatitudes and seeing all these things that don't really make sense in this world, I feel like Jesus looks at me and he says, Ryan, this is the way. This is the way of the kingdom. Church, when we read the Beatitudes, we have to go into them knowing that this is the way of the kingdom. Otherwise, the Beatitudes are going to be really confusing and maybe sometimes frustrating for us. There's a pastor and an author that I read sometimes. His name is Scott McKnight. And he says, the way of Jesus is the kingdom, realistic or not. The way of Jesus is the kingdom, realistic or not. And so it's with this perspective in mind that we encounter today's Beatitude. It's Matthew 5:9, and it says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And I think on the surface, this seems really nice and loving and caring, but think about how unsatisfying this might be at times. Like Jesus comes into this world, and he really comes into a particular nation, a particular religion, and they would have been looking for a savior. They would have been looking for a deliverer. Many of them really looking for a revolutionary to overthrow the empire, to really reinstate this nation, this kingdom that they had in the past. And in this environment, Jesus instead says, blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers. So peacemaking may make total sense to you when you're right, or when you have won, or when you stand to benefit from the peace. Peacemaking seems like a great idea. But peacemaking may also be incredibly difficult. What if you've been done wrong? What if you're being asked to swallow something that you've been holding on really, really tight to? Or what if making peace seems absolutely unfair to you in that situation? Peacemaking is going to feel so unfulfilling. But this is the way. This is the way of the kingdom. So we have a hard time making sense of the Beatitudes sometimes, but really, they're being written for another kingdom. They're all about another kingdom, one that is not like ours, but one that is on its way. And it's with this kingdom in mind that Jesus calls us to go ahead and live like it is here and now, and to go ahead and bring this kingdom a little bit closer and closer to this present reality. And speaking of present reality, let me take a quick side note and talk about some current events just for a second. So we might look at what's happening in Ukraine, and we see people preparing for war, and we wonder, well, where is the peace in all of this? I think it's an important thing that we keep in mind that peace in the Bible really comes from the Hebrew word shalom, which doesn't really mean the absence of conflict. It's not like a doormat sort of peace. But shalom is much more about restoration and really putting things back together. And so peace in the Bible is not really a two-dimensional idea. It's really a rich concept that we have to wrestle with sometimes. So when is it time to fight for justice, like we see in Ukraine? But also, when is it time to surrender the fight and to begin putting things back together, maybe with an estranged loved one, or maybe with a friend who has done you wrong in the past. And swallowing whatever that is may feel so unsatisfying at times. But church, this is the way. This is the way of God's kingdom. Putting things back together is the way of God's coming kingdom. And Jesus shows how we can start living like that kingdom right here and right now. So church, I pray for all of us that we could begin to live like God's kingdom, do this sort of kingdom stuff, even when it is so difficult, because our culture doesn't go this way. Maybe the way that we have been brought up doesn't really go this way, but this is the way of God's kingdom, and it is coming. And we're being called to bring that kingdom closer and closer to earth. So I pray for all of us that we could have the courage to do difficult stuff and bring God's kingdom here closer to earth. So thank you for tuning in. I love you, church. We'll catch you next week.